Early PFI schemes were tied into relatively inflexible contracts. In healthcare, where the demand for infrastructure and equipment is constantly changing, this is a concern.
There's no doubt that, let's call it traditional PFI, and that model which we experimented with in the early 90s, that really did embrace simply the context of creating a new piece of infrastructure, a new building or a new road or whatever it was, and maintaining it in that state for the life of the concession. Well, life isn't like that. There are all sorts of drivers, influences that cause the environment around that physical asset to change.
Calderdale Hospital was quick to recognise these limitations and found ways of managing the necessary changes.
In the early days, for example, every change was accompanied by a formal contract variation. That can be very, very expensive and time-consuming. What we've tried to do now is work together to develop systems that will enable us to make these small changes, which happen on a daily basis, with the minimum, so that they become a routine in effect.
The PFI itself is not a constraint on flexibility, it's just that change is cost, but changes have always cost. You may not have known it before, we now know what it is.
The perceived cost of PFI projects has always attracted criticism, even though the National Audit Office has shown that they perform as well overall as publicly funded facilities. But protests were renewed with the revelation that some consortia were refinancing their loans post-construction and reaping large financial gains.
When a project's initiated, there are a lot of uncertainties around it, how well it's going to work, what the risks are, these sorts of things. So the private sector consortium will take out finance for the project, obviously at the best rate they can get. But that rate is bound to be governed by what lenders see as the risks surrounding the project in the future. Now, as we move downstream and the project becomes more mature, it's up and running, it's been running for a few years perhaps, it's looking quite successful, the private sector consortium, they can then obtain funding at a lower rate of interest than the original funding because the project's now got a lower risk profile. Where the controversy comes in about refinancing is that, of course, the private sector consortium now has lower costs, lower borrowing costs, therefore it makes higher profit.
The issue first came to light with Alt Course Prison.
The contract was let in 1995 and the prison opened in 1997. It opened early and the investors, the private consortium, won brownie points and some hard cash from the prison service, which was the Department of the Home Office responsible. And then in 1999, they did a rather interesting thing. They went to their lenders and they renegotiated the finance. The finance, as we know, accounts for over 80% of the funding.